So what happened? I guess it's as simple as it is horrible. A lot of priests, a small percentage, but a lot, and one is too many. A lot of priests sexually abused young people, and worse than that, imagine it could get any worse. And worse than that, some of those young people had the courage to say something about it, and some bishops and people who work with them covered it up. That doesn't even make any sense to me. That's so horrible and so wicked. It's unfathomable.
We live in a world that I think, in a very good way right now, is focused on holding people accountable. We've seen a lot going on in a lot of different arenas where things are being brought into the light that for too long have been in the darkness. And that's a good thing. That's not something that we should be afraid of. That's good. This has also happened in our church.
And let's go back to the summer, in the summer of 2018. You may or may not be aware that there was a high-ranking cardinal, a leader in the church in America, who was named as one who has had the sexual abuse of a minor in his own history. It was a shock to the country. It was a shock to priests. It was a shock to many of the laity in our own diocese to hear that a leader in the church at that kind of level would be labeled or named or accused with such an egregious sin. And at the same time that happened, you may or may not be aware that the Pennsylvania grand jury report was released, and it brought to light cases of priest sexual abuse of a minor that started all the way back in the 1950s and 60s, and there were cases and cases and cases in a period of about 50 years that were brought to light, and the subject matter, the number of cases was overwhelming for a lot of people. It was also reported that for a number of years, the leaders of the church in some dioceses hid that, covered it up. They simply transferred priests from parish to parish. And the evil of sexual abuse was compounded, magnified by the sin and the scandal of how some of the leaders in the church covered that up. Bishop Fabre has felt in his heart a grief for what he and you and me have been seeing in the news. For the last several months, Bishop Fabre and his leadership team around him have had some conversations about how we can best respond as a diocese, how we can help you, how we can help the victims and their families, how we can together rebuild trust with any person in our diocese who may be struggling with the news that they have seen firsthand, or maybe who has learned about things and they haven't heard it from the bishop or the church, they heard it from somebody else. On January the 11th, 2019, Bishop Fabre released a pastoral letter entitled Light in the Darkness. And he did that because he wants to do that. He wants to bring light into the darkness. It's a beautiful pastoral letter which outlines, in his own words, how we got to where we are. What is the situation that the church is facing at this time? He also outlines what happens in the church today in 2019 if we find out that there is any abuse of a minor by a priest or anybody. But the pastoral letter isn't enough. The Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux on Friday, January 11th, also made the decision, like other dioceses across the country, to voluntarily release the names of any priest in our diocese since the beginning of our diocese back in 1977 who has a credible allegation of the sexual abuse of a minor. You can access that list on our diocesan website, again, www.htdiocese.org, and look for Light in the Darkness. I do want to just very clearly say that on the list of names that was released, there is no name of any active priest in the diocese right now that's on that list. There are no priests actively in ministry right now in our diocese who have an allegation, a credible allegation, or any allegation of the sexual abuse of a minor. Some of us may be asking a really good question, which is, why is the diocese choosing to release these names now? Well, simply because it's the right thing to do. For many of the victims and their families, they've never had an opportunity to hear the church publicly apologize for something that changed their life forever. For many of the communities that have heard through the grapevine, or who saw Father leave unexpectedly, or who have never had closure themselves, the release of names is the right thing to do for the communities who have never heard clearly from the church what did and what did not happen.
So I think this kind of initiative of bringing it to the light where it can receive healing is going to be the way that it may hurt at first, but it's also going to bring about the most grace, the most healing. An image I like to use in thinking about it is if I have like a big cut on my arm, or I have a big cut on my leg or something, I can put gauze on it to keep it from bleeding. And after a while, I can compact the gauze just to keep it from bleeding and keep putting more and more and more and just pushing it down on the wound. But to bring healing to that wound, I've got to rip the gauze off. Once the bleeding has stopped, that's fine. But to get the medicine to it that I need, to stitch it up, to clean it up, I need to pull the gauze off. That pulling of the gauze off can be hurt. That can really hurt. That can be something that really isn't comfortable. That can be something that, that's a painful process. But in the end, the goal is to heal the wound, right? And I think that's what we're embarking on, in trying to just peel the gauze off of the wound that's there to bring healing to it.